Okay, so I'm just going to finish up with what I started last Sunday night over there. I confronted something over there because they needed it. Y'all don't really need it, but now you'll know you do. You're not going to come into contact with this usually with general public. You know, the general public, you need to confront sin and righteousness. Amongst the spiritual crowd, you have to confront these minute, nitpicky issues. Calvinism versus Arminianism. Okay, that shouldn't have any, we should all be way beyond that. But they weren't. The reason is they had this, the London Baptist Confession of Faith of 1698. 1689. That is Calvinism. It's based on the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is Presbyterian. And so, right off the bat, there's some words to start looking out for. When people don't use Bible words, it's because they're hiding something or they're building something out of nothing. So, the second word on there, covenant. We don't have a covenant. Amen. Israel had a covenant, and they're going to get a new covenant. That's all God's dealing with a nation. We've been given Jesus Christ. I've got something way better than a covenant. I've got the Son of God, and I'm put into him. You can have promises. I've got the real deal. Much better. So the covenant clues you in. The other thing is they'll use these big words, and I began going through their covenant thing to correct it. I didn't announce that that's what I was doing, but that's how I was teaching. So here's an important passage to know. It's Romans chapter 9. Romans 9. This is a Calvinist proof text that they're right. So Romans 9 and Romans 9, we'll start in verse 11. Previous to this, he's been talking about Israel having been given the promises and the covenants and all of that stuff by God. And then he goes through and he talks about Esau versus Jacob, or Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, and the line of Jew. Look at verse 11. For the children being not yet born, Esau and Jacob, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to the election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. So they say, okay, God decreed that because before they were even born, God decreed this one's going to be good and I'm going to send this one to hell. But that's not what the passage says. It does not say anything about salvation, does it? It doesn't say anything about one going to heaven, one going to hell. Let's keep reading, verse 12. It was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. So what was election? One was elect to lead, one was elect to serve. That was the election. It's just a position. The position God had placed on those two sons, and it's not the sons, it's the nations that come from them. Okay, let's keep reading. The elder shall serve the younger. Verse 13, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. Now he said right there, as it is written. So this he's quoting something. So we need to find out what he's quoting so we can understand it. That's in Malachi chapter 1. Malachi 1 verse 2. I have loved you, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Saith the Lord, yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Now look, here you notice it's a nation, not an individual. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and rebuild, so forth, so on. So the hating and loving is 1,000 years later in Malachi. Not in Genesis 22, or I think it's 22, where they're born. When they're born, the Esau and Jacob that he's talking about there, he says, she says, you know, if I'm being blessed, then how come I'm having all this travail? And God says, because 2 manner of people and 2 nations are within you. So he was dealing with those individuals as nations and referring to their descendants. So it's an election to one to be the leader and one to be the servant. Now, being a servant is not a bad place. Just because God said somebody's going to be a servant, they can be blessed being a servant. Aren't we supposed to be? Yeah, we're servants. So it's not a bad thing. Just stay in the position God put you in. Let's see. Back to Romans.
You actually remind me of a part of the Bible that talks about Jesus was speaking to a man, and the man wanted healing for a servant or something. And when he asked Jesus for his help, he's like, and Jesus says, go, lead me. The servant's like, oh, I'm not worthy.
Right.
So I said,
right.
The soldier comes, the soldier comes.
Mm-hmm.
So the soldier goes, the soldier goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go down to, then he goes through, okay, so we've seen Esau and Jacob. And he started out with Abraham. So he's talking about the line. Now, who was accepted and who was rejected as far as the leadership is concerned? Of course, Esau is rejected. The bottom line is this: God can pick whoever he wants to be the leader and whoever he wants to be the loser. No, not loser, to be the servant. Now, that's the way a Calvinist reads it. A Calvinist reads, if you're not the leader, you're a loser. That's not God. God has people that serve, and that's part of their function. He does the same thing in the body of Christ. We're all members, and we all have different jobs. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. Your job is important because that's what God gave you. If your job is to serve, that's the job he intends you. You're elect to it. Then he's going to go on, and he's going to talk about another comparison. And if you'll notice this, it's always a comparison of Israel on top and some heathen on the bottom. He goes on and he talks about Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh was wicked. If you were a Jew and you had received this book of Romans, you would read it this way. Okay, the covenants and the oracles were given to me. I'm number one. You know, I'm of the seed of Abraham. What he's going to do in here is he's going to say, you know, God picked and chose who was going to be the leader and who was going to be the follower. And it's God's right to do that. He can pick and choose the leader or the follower, not salvation. Nowhere is it talking about salvation. What he's about to do is he's going to flip the tables on them. And he's going to say, you used to be on the top, but now God's not going to do that anymore, and he's going to allow the Gentiles to be on top, and you're going to be the servant. So he's provoking them from the beginning right here, just as he'll finish up in chapter 11 saying, I'll provoke you. Look at it in verse 7. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they the children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Those are the children, though. Romans 9, verse 7. Verse 8. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. Now, if you were a Jew, that was a big insult. He just said, just because you're of the flesh of Abraham and the seed, the offspring, that's not enough to be the children of God. Woo. He made them mad. But the children of the promise are counted for the seed. Ooh. And then he went through and he started comparing the ones God chose and the ones he elected for some other purpose. Verse 18. Therefore he hath mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he will he hardeneth. Okay, that's a great proof text for a Calvinist. God picks and chooses who he's going to harden and who he's not going to harden. And well, it goes against what a Calvinist actually believes, even though they're going to use this verse to say this is their doctrine. Their doctrine is this, something that's not in the Bible. It's called total depravity. See the big fancy words? We got to use big fancy words that aren't in the Bible so we sound special. Yep. Total depravity, that's the T. Total depravity. Okay, if he's totally depraved, then how can he be hardened?
He's already there.
Yeah, you were born hardened according to a Calvinist. You cannot be hardened more. So they don't even really believe what they're saying they believe. Okay, so if you were hardened, that means at some point you were softer than you are now. And you had a choice, obviously. But a Calvinist doesn't really believe in total depravity. They believe you are depraved but can continue to get worse because of this passage. They say that it means that you're born in sin, but you can become more and more wicked as God decides you need more wickedness. Craziness. What they really believe is this: inability. They don't mean depravity, they mean inability. They mean you do not have the ability to come to Christ and respond to his invitation. That God has decided who will and who will not. And those that will not, he's forced them to not be able to come to him. That's why he's going to talk about vessels of wrath. Where's that? Verse 22. What if God, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction, that he might make known the riches of his glory, so forth and so on. Okay, so the question becomes this. This is a vessel of wrath. Of course, he's talking about, he says vessels plural there. So he's probably talking about Esau and Pharaoh, because those were the two in the context. So the question is this: how did they become vessels of wrath? A Calvinist will say God made them a vessel of wrath from the beginning. Well, all you have to do is look up the word vessel, and you find that God says you become a vessel based on how you act. If you want to be a vessel of honor, you separate yourself from vessels of dishonor. Okay, so the vessel isn't made into any specific function. You choose your own function according to a vessel. The question is this: was the vessel created a vessel of wrath? Or did it deteriorate into it by choice? Yeah, it chose to become a vessel of wrath. If you go back through the issue on Pharaoh, Pharaoh hardens his heart. And then eventually God hardens his heart even more. The same thing with Israel as a nation. Israel chose to shut their eyes and close their ears to God. And eventually God said, okay, I'll add more to it. That was their damnation. Look at Romans 9 verse 3. Romans 9 verse 3. This is who the chapter is aimed at. It's not aimed at saved people and lost people. This is Paul saying, I'm reaching out to my people, which is Israel, the nation. And I'm telling them there's a new system in place and you better get on board or you're going to hell. I mean, that's what he's telling them. Verse 3. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, the other Jews. Verse 4, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, and promises. He said God set them up so that they could have all this stuff, but it's changed now. If I could, I'd trade places. Now, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't trade places with anybody. My salvation is worth more than any love I have for any other person. I'm sorry. Now, Paul was on a different plane than me, and he can keep that plane. The problem with these vessels of wrath is this. They had already assumed their final shape by the time God decided to destroy them. You find the same thing with Isaiah. He talks about the potter and the clay. What does he do with that? The potter continues to try to mold it, and the clay gets so stubborn it won't be molded. And what does the potter do? He smashes it up. Okay, so there's the right context for Calvinism. Romans 9, look at verse 20. Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, Why hast thou made me thus? Good question, Esau. Good question, Pharaoh. Good question, Israel. What he's saying here is God formed one, Esau, to be the servant. And he formed another one, Jacob, to be the leader. He formed Israel in the Old Testament to be a light to the Gentiles. When they refused, once we get to chapter 11, he'll say, I broke off their branch. That is, I removed them from that position and gave it to a nation not worthy, a people that aren't even a people. Jude chapter 1. Well, like there's more. Jude verse 4.
Measure, I remember one time you mentioned ordering boxes of Bibles. Those going to the church or here?
Oh no, that's anything they do down there they got to vote on. We decide to do something, we just do it. Jude verse 4. For there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation, ungodly men, turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness, and denying the only Lord God and our Lord Jesus Christ. Verse 7. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. You notice what it does not say in there that a Calvinist can't see? It does not say God created Sodom and Gomorrah in order to make them a display. No, they went after strange flesh. They gave themselves over to more and more wickedness. That was their choice, not God's choice. Look at Acts 28. Acts 28, verse 26. Acts 28, 26. I know y'all don't doctrinally need this, but this was the notes I already had prepared for down there, so. Acts 28, verse 26. Saying, Go unto this people and say, Hearing ye shall hear, talking about the Jews, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and not perceive. For the heart of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have they closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and should be converted, and I should heal them. Okay, God said it's their choice. They shut their eyes and they closed their ears. God didn't determine that they shut their eyes. They determined that. Romans chapter 10. Romans 10, verse 8. Romans 10, verse 8, he says, But what saith it? The word. Now he's going to explain what that word means in a minute. The word is nigh thee, even in thy mouth and in thy heart. Okay, that's something God-given, not man-given. Here he's going to explain it. That is the word of faith which we preach. Paul came to town. He says, I'm preaching some stuff and you don't like it. But I'm going to tell you what, you've already got it in your mouth and in your heart. God saw to it. You've got enough faith to believe. God saw to it. Now, that shows that God already called all men. There's no point in being elect because they all are. He gave them faith enough to believe in him. So everybody has it. Now what they do with it's up to them. Look at Romans 12. Romans 12, verse 3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to the elect? No, to every man the measure of faith. That is, every single person that moves on this globe, God's given enough faith to believe him. You don't have to be elect. The whole world is. What you do with it is your choice. Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians 4, verse 7. Ephesians 4, 7. But unto every one of us is given grace. So we've all been given faith, but something else. Grace. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Okay. We don't even need to talk about elect anymore, because every single human has been given enough grace and enough faith to accept. Okay, now it's their decision. The whole world is right now at a big public invitation ceremony from Jesus Christ. And it's their turn to move. One more passage. No, I better not say that. A bunch more passages. John chapter 6. John chapter 6. John 6. And I'm probably starting off with the wrong verse here, so let me find you another one. John 6. John 6, let's go to verse 30. Yeah, verse 37. I have it right. John 6, 37. All that the Father giveth me shall come to me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. Calvinists will tell you that's right. If God didn't give someone to Jesus Christ, he can't come to him. Those are the elect. Only the elect were given, and they will come to him. Well, that's kind of the way the verse looks. So, what a Calvinist will do is he'll give you one verse without giving you any context, anything before or anything after, so he can make it say what he wants it to. But any verse that seems a little difficult to understand, you need to read the whole chapter, or maybe the whole book, and soon you'll understand what he meant. Look at verse 32. Now, I'm sorry. Hold your place there. I'll come back. Go to chapter 12, verse 32. Chapter 12, verse 32. The Bible says here very clearly, Jesus talking, and I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw the elect? Nope. All men unto me. Okay, they're all drawn right there. Okay, back to our passage in John 6. He says, we started with verse 37. All that the Father giveth me shall come unto me, or come to me. That's right. Every single person has come to a decision for Christ. You either decided to believe on him or to reject him. They've all come to him. They've all come to the point where God has said, what are you going to do with Jesus Christ? Now, that doesn't mean that they all accepted him, but Jesus Christ said, if I'm lifted up, I'll draw all men. And in verse 37 of chapter 6, he says that all that the Father gives me will come to me. Okay? Now, you've got to come in belief for it to do you any good. Look at verse... where is that? Verse 40. And this is the will of him that sent me, so God the Father, that everyone which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. Okay, so there he's saying, something a Calvinist will run with, that whoever that God chose as the elect come to Jesus, and when they come to Jesus, he gives them something. Okay? The problem with that is, if they're going to nitpick, let's nitpick. It says those that saw him. Nobody here has seen him.
That's right.
That only applied to the ones that were at the cross, I guess. Well, they don't really believe that either. Okay, so watch them. They'll try to manipulate Scripture in order to use it for their own means. So when they do it, turn it around and use it right against them. Look at John chapter 1. John 1 verse 12. John 1:12, it says, "But as many as received him." Okay, that puts the decision on you, not on God. God's not electing or kicking out somebody here. He's saying you make the decision. Okay? As many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, even to them that believed on his name. Romans 5 verse 10. Romans 5 verse 10. This is a good chapter. In Romans, I don't know why, but in the beginning part of Romans, there are some passages you got to really study. Or else you'll come away thinking something that the rest of it doesn't say. Romans 5, let's start in verse 10. "For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." Okay, the Calvinist says that means God decided you're going to be in. Verse 11. "And not only so, but we also joy in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom ye have now received the atonement." Didn't say we're given, we're granted. You received it. I could hand a notebook out. You don't really, I could say, "David, this is your notebook." You can't have it. I could say, "This is your notebook." But unless he takes it, it's not his yet. Okay, that's received. Once he receives it, it's now his. This is the receiving right here. Received the atonement. Somebody made a decision. Verse 12. "Wherefore as by one man," this is a good passage, "wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin." So death passed upon those that were not elect. Death passed upon all, A-L-L, men, for that all have, the next word is very important. See the last two letters on that word, sin, E-D. What does that mean? It means you committed a sin. So, I'm going to say something here that is not typical. Okay?
Really?
I'm gonna go off the deep end here, but this is something I figured out between me and God, and he may change that in the future. He's welcome to do that, but I don't think he will. It says right here, "For that all have sinned." So when did you become the servant of sin? The second you sinned, you became a sinner. Prior to that, you were not a sinner. Now, I know the standard teaching is this: because you were born of Adam, you're born with the sin nature. I say that's not correct. When you're born of Adam, you're born with an addiction to sin, but you're not born with sin yet until you step out on it. An addict, a crack baby, the babies that are born with an addiction to crack, they could kick that habit. Some of them can if they accept the help that's available. But more than likely, you're going to adhere to your addiction. And that's what man does. He adheres to that addiction. When he does, he becomes a servant of sin. Verse 13. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there's no law. Okay, Paul's going to go on later and he's going to say, I was alive once without the law. When the law came, sin revived, I died. So the first time he sinned, the law revived, says because you sinned, there's a law that every sinner has to die. It revived, and then he was dead. Verse 14, nevertheless, death reigned from Adam till Moses, even over them that had not sinned after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that is to come, a reverse figure. Okay, the reverse figure is going to come up, and he's going to do something different than Adam. Verse 15, but not as the offense. This is tricky wording. He's saying differently than what was done before, differently than Adam. So also is the free gift. For through the offense of one, many be dead. Okay? Adam's transgression passed on the addiction to sin. Jesus Christ's atonement passed on an opportunity for you to accept righteousness. Much more than the grace of God and the gift by grace, which is by one man, Jesus Christ, hath abounded unto many. And not as it was by one that sinned, so is the gift. For the judgment was by one to condemnation, but the free gift to many offenses unto justification. Here's the important verse, verse 17. For if by one man's offense death reigned by one, much more than they which... What's that word? Receive abundance of the grace of the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by Jesus Christ. You have to receive it. And it's plain right there. The gift is available. Receive it or not, it's up to you. Not up to God. God's already done his part. Verse 18. Therefore, as by the offense of one, judgment came upon a couple of people. The elect, the non-elect. No, all, A-L-L. A Calvinist, you have to run to the word all. Now, they've got a funny way of handling the word all. All means every single. If it doesn't mean every single, it'll make it clear in the passage. But it means all. A Calvinist will try to read in elect or non-elect. They'll say all without exception or all without something else. I can't remember it right now. They use these funny ways of, it means all in a group or all without any qualifications. But no, it just means all. We know what all means. We speak English. Judgment came upon all men to condemnation, even so by the righteousness of one, the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. Now, this clarifies another verse. Verse 18 makes it clear, at least the way I read it. Now, other people don't see this, but that's up to them. To me, that makes it clear, verse 12. The condemnation came upon all when they chose. Just like the justification came upon all if they chose. So in verse 12, if you chose to sin, you became a sinner. If you chose the justification of Jesus Christ, you became righteous. It's all based on a choice. 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 1.
First Corinthians what?
15, verse 1. This is the gospel. For our age, somebody asks you what the gospel is, it's right here. Paul explains it very clearly, and he identifies it as the gospel. And I need to turn there. 1 Corinthians 15, it'll be verse 1 to 3. And I'm going to point out why it's important to know this is the gospel. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 1 to 3. Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you, which also ye have, there's our word again, received, and wherein ye stand, by which also ye are saved. Okay, so how do you get saved? You receive the gospel. It's up to you. By which also ye are saved, if ye keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless ye believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all that which also I received. So I got saved first, and then I offered it to somebody else. How that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. Okay, so there's the gospel. And it's all contingent on, in order for it to be beneficial, you have to receive it. It's not that God has declared you're going to have it and you're not going to have it. I've declared that you're, here's the word they use, a decree from God that you're reprobate. So that you're either the elect or you're the reprobate. They have two categories. Those are the persons that they think God has decreed go to hell. Now, the other thing to do, I don't have time to do it tonight, but do this sometime. Look up the word decree. The Calvinists love the word decree. Here's what they'll say. They'll say eternal, God's eternal decrees. He doesn't have any eternal decrees. Now, he does have some. Here's where they are. They're going to have to do with the stars. He says, I decreed to the sea that it can't go beyond this bound. Okay, that's where he decreed something. It doesn't have anything to do with you getting saved or not getting saved. So they'll take that little phrasing, decree, and suddenly read into it wherever they want to put it. No, if he means decree, he'll say decree. Here's another word they love, sovereignty. Doesn't that sound special? Okay, let me ask you something. What does that mean? What does it mean to be sovereign? Any ideas? You think it means holy?
The way I've always heard it from people that use that word is he's in control.
Okay, I'm just asking what the word means, not how you view it as a religious.
The word itself, as I understand it, is the exclusive authority, ultimate.
There are sovereigns on this earth. That's nothing new. That doesn't mean that you're God. The sovereign is just the ruler of a territory.
Like the president.
Correct. Usually it's used with kings. God is not sovereign. He's way above sovereign.
Amen.
God is holy and righteous and the Almighty. Now, the other thing you can look at is the word power. That's how he's explained himself many times throughout the Bible. Every time it's a reference to not only physical power, but moral righteousness. Okay, that's a very different term than sovereign. Some of the sovereign rulers this world has seen are very wicked. So just being a sovereign ain't good enough. The other thing is this, that word does not appear in your Bible. So why would I take a word that does not appear in your Bible and say it's a description of God? That's dangerous. Then build a whole doctrine on it. That's dangerous. Okay, that's Calvinism in a very small nutshell. Okay, that'll do it for tonight.